Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around I got 3 movies about cloning for Science Fiction Saturday. One from 1995, one from 2018 and one from 2023. The first one is a steampunk magical kind of science fiction. Jean-Pierre and Mark Caro's The City of Lost Children. The second one is directed by Sebastian Gutierrez, and it is Elizabeth Harvest. And the third one from 2023 is Brandon Cronenberg's Infinity Pool. So let's get started with the easiest of the 3, The City of Lost Children from 1995. This one was co-directed and co-produced by Mark Caro, who was a special effects technician and a cinematographer, and Jean-Pierre Jeunet, who'd had some success with a movie called Delicatessen, and after The City of Lost Children went on to greater fame with movies like Amelie, which became an enormous hit, and recently did a Netflix film I've talked about on the channel already called Big Bug. They're both beautiful visual stylists, and The City of Lost Children is quite unlike any other movie with the possible exception of Delicatessen. In it, Ron Perlman stars as a circus strongman called One, whose little brother is kidnapped by some entities who were created by a missing scientist. The oldest of them is a guy called Crank, who is aging prematurely because he was created and cannot dream. There are a whole bunch of clones who assist him, played by Dominique Pignon, who turned up later on in a movie directed by Jeunet, Alien Resurrection. There's also a brain in a box with the voice of Jean-Louis Trintignant. It's hard to describe this movie. One goes on this quest to find his little brother who's been kidnapped and taken to the headquarters of these strange entities, which is on a kind of isolated platform in the middle of the ocean surrounded by a minefield. He's assisted by a young girl called Crumb and a bunch of young street ragamuffins. He also is helped by the guy who ran the carnival he worked for. It's so hard to describe this movie. It's incredible. It's a beautifully shot film. It's wonderfully acted. You never know where it's going from one minute to another. There are all sorts of strange entities and creatures in the world of The City of Lost Children. There is a Fagin-like creature called the Octopus, which is a pair of conjoined twin women who treat the children who steal for them very, very poorly, and who seem to have a love-hate relationship with one another. And yes, I know that this is disability is seen as evil, but in the context of the movie, pretty much everyone except one has some form of disability or another. There's also a group of cultists called the Cyclopses, who are a bunch of blind men who were given sight as part of their cult initiation in a very crude form of steampunk eye prosthesis. Now, I don't want to give too much of the plot away, apart from saying that the quest that One is on is to get his little brother. And as he does that, he builds friendships and alliances. He's more strong than smart, and he gets into all sorts of weird and wonderful situations. At one stage, he's about to walk the plank in a very unusual way that involves rotting fish and seagulls. There's a kind of flea which can be trained to inject poison into the scalps of people it lands upon, which then drives them into a murderous rage, and that's used very effectively by particularly the octopus to overcome and destroy their enemies. This movie is deeply weird. Most of the effects are practical, though there is a little bit of early computer-generated stuff that makes certain scenes look beautiful and strange and scary all at the same time. They did an interesting thing with the look of the film to get the kind of milky, turgid green coloration of the color palette in the film. All of the actors had their faces painted white, and then in post-production, the directors tweaked the color values to get skin tones on all of the actors, tweaking the color values on the film stock to get the kind of flesh color. Most of these people are white, so you've got white flesh coloring. It gives everything else a really strange look. I kind of like that creativity. It's something people could do these days if they chose to give movies a certain look, though it's much easier now to tweak color palettes around actors to get whatever effect you like as far as the light and the shadows and the feel of a movie that it was in 1995, when all of this kind of technology was still at a very early stage. Now, this is an interesting Ron Perlman role where he plays a hero rather than an antagonist. Yes, he did it in Hellboy, but for the most part he's played brutish kind of characters, and even though his character One appears brutish, he's actually a gentle soul. He stopped being a harpooner for a whaling company, for instance, because he could hear the songs of the whales and didn't want to do it anymore. So he's a sensitive soul in a brutish casing. The brains of the outfit turns out to be the girl Crumb, who helps him through his travails and gives him a way of getting his little brother back and freeing all of the other children that these strange entities have kidnapped. There's also a man in a submarine who seems to be one of the clones, which is kind of interesting. Describing a Jean-Pierre Jeunet movie is kind of difficult. You just got to go, yes, it's good, buckle up for the ride and just go for it. Now, I believe there is a dubbed version, but go with the subtitles, because even Ron Perlman speaks French, and Ron Perlman couldn't speak French. And that actually works in favour of the movie, because one doesn't speak very much, and when he does, it's usually in short sentences or monosyllables. And so Ron Perlman was able to convey the idea that his character was speaking French without actually knowing any French at all. He spoke all of his lines phonetically, but he did them very, very well. This movie is one of those ones I picked up for $1 on DVD in a thrift store. And to be honest with you, it's a good buy for me. I hadn't seen it before. Remember, all of January, I'm only watching movies I haven't seen before. And I hadn't seen The City of Lost Children before. I've seen Amelie, I've seen Delicatessen, I've seen Big Bug, but I haven't seen this one. And it was magical, and for half of the movie, at least half of the movie, I was kind of going, where is this movie going? We know that there's a through line of trying to get the little brother back, but how is it going to get there? And who the hell are all these strange creatures and strange people we find in the movie? And that's a fun place to be. Kind of lost, but not minding being lost in the quirky, messed up narrative of this film. The production design, by the way, is fantastic. The evocation of the city is something truly extraordinary, and the kind of grunginess and the lived-inness of it, and the fact that, yes, there are bars that are brothels, and there are hidden places all over this city, which seems to be itself on a floating platform in the ocean, is something really extraordinary. Just creating something in a way that hasn't been created in film before is great credit to the filmmakers. This one is a special piece of steampunkish science fiction, and it works. Every trick in the book is used to carry off the world of this movie, and the characters, and the way it looks, the way it feels, and the way the people in it feel like they live there. The costumes are designed by Jean-Paul Gaultier, and Jeunet went to Gaultier and said, listen, we can't afford to make all of this stuff up and then make all of these beautiful clothes you've created for our work. And Gaultier said, don't worry about it, I'll pay for it. And indeed he did. And we get the kind of very Jean-Paul Gaultier jersey that one wears through 90% of the movie, which is like a signature piece of Jean-Paul Gaultier clothing. And all the other characters are wearing fantastic clothes as well, all designed by one of the great French clothing designers who also worked on movies like The Fifth Element. But just to finalise on The City of Lost Children, if you haven't seen it, you should see it. If you haven't seen it for a while, you should definitely see it. It's got weird clones, it's got weird steampunk cyborgs, it's got conjoined twins who seem to share a nervous system but hate each other's guts, it's got a brain in a box. What more can you want? You just got to go for the ride, you've got to go for the story, and you've got to go just to see how subtle an actor Ron Perlman can be when he really wants to. And in this movie, he was the only person on the set that couldn't speak French, and so that kind of bemusement is used to inhabit the character of one in a wonderful way. Check it out if you haven't. If you have, definitely watch it again. So that's the first of the movies. Next up, we've got Sebastian Gutierrez's Elizabeth Harvest, which is a weird film. It stars Abby Lee as the titular woman Elizabeth, Kieran Hines as her husband, Henry Kellenberg, who is a genius scientist who, along with his assistant Claire, played by Carla Gugino, lives in a large house, isolated in the country, along with his son Oliver, who is blind. They're the only people on the property. Henry has married Elizabeth and brings her to the house, But Elizabeth seems very vague and kind of a little bit out of it. Now, I'm going to give you the first spoiler on this one, but not the rest of them. The first spoiler is Elizabeth is one of a series of clones Henry has created from his dead wife, who died of a previously undetected genetic abnormality. He's cloned her and has decided that he wants to get rid of that genetic abnormality, and Claire is the scientist assisting him with this. He's also really misogynistic. He and Elizabeth consummate their relationship in their honeymoon and live in the house, but Elizabeth starts wondering about the room in the basement she's not allowed to visit. The bottom line of this movie is it's a high-tech science fiction iteration of Bluebeard. This old story's been told in cinema a lot. John Carradine played Bluebeard in the movie. There's the really bad Richard Burton movie of Bluebeard, which Imprint are putting out on Blu-ray here in Australia. And I want it apart from any other reason, because it has a wonderful Ennio Morricone soundtrack. But back to this one. It's an iteration of Bluebeard. Don't understand much. We understand that Elizabeth is a prisoner in a sense and doesn't actually have a real identity. She's a clone. She doesn't have any legal standing in the world. And Henry is a dangerous man in so many different ways. And we learned a lot of things about Henry right from the start. This movie is not for people who aren't comfortable with nudity and certain kinds of implicit assault. Let's put it that way. And we learn very quickly that Henry is, amongst other things, a scientific genius. And he's also very selfish in the horizontal fun area, let's just say. Now, I got about a third of the way through this movie and I thought, do I like this movie or don't I? What's happening here? It looks like they've front-loaded the twist a little too early. And some of the cinematography seems off, but there was a reason later on in the movie that's the case. And then the second twist comes in, the ones I'm not going to tell you about. And then the third twist comes in, and then the fourth and the fifth. And we ultimately learn the true nature of Henry, the true nature of his son Oliver, and the true nature of both Elizabeth and Claire. This movie really backloads the good stuff. The stuff up the front seems to be something, well, yeah, I know about this movie, I know where this movie is going. But I didn't. The stuff that happened later in the movie and the twists that take place and the flashbacks that explain a lot of the things that occur in the first third of the film are really well done. Sebastian Gutierrez, who by the way is the partner of Carla Gugino and has been since the 1990s, is really good at this stuff. He creates an atmosphere, and the whole movie is pretty much set in the house and on the grounds of the house, and it's a five-hander. You've got Kieran Hines, you've got Abby Lee, you've got Carla Gugino, you have Matthew something or other playing the son, and you have Dylan Baker turning up as a cop. So it's a five-hander shot on one location, telling a very complex story about the nature of human beings and the nature of this man who has the ability to clone people and the incredible narrow and ugly and self-serving things he does with that ability. This one's a definite hidden gem. It's not the best movie on the subject in the world, but it's an honest effort, and it is like so many movies made in the last 15 years about problematic aspects of masculinity and about how people with power can abuse it, and people who have economic, social and gendered power left unchecked can use it in incredibly monstrous ways. And Henry in this one is a monster. I think his first name is very indicative. He is somewhat of a Frankenstein character, and Abby Lee, the Australian actress who plays Elizabeth, does really well at the centre of the movie. She has some very challenging things she has to do in this movie, and she does them really well. And Carla Gugino, as a complex but kind of withdrawn Claire, does really well as well. This one's a bit of a hidden gem. It takes you on a very twisted journey. Really, there are aspects to it that I'm not going to spoil for you, but you really got to inhabit. But ultimately, I enjoyed the film because I like the journey that Elizabeth goes on to find her own strength and to live with the fact that she is who and what she is. It's a real odd little film. I don't know whether everybody's going to like it, but I think you should give it a go. It combines horror with science fiction, as many movies of this type do. One of the streams we have in science fiction in the 2020s is that a science fiction movie, unless it's an action film, very, very often combines aspects of horror movie with the science fiction. And there's a lot of blood in this movie, so prepare yourself for that. But if you haven't seen Elizabeth Harvest, you should check that one out. It's a recommend from me. Try to see as little as possible about it before you watch it, the way I did. And you're going to go for a fine journey there.
But believe me when I say that we are on a mission of mercy. It's time for you to shed that disgusting larval mind of yours.
So it's the time for the third one, Brandon Cronenberg's Infinity Pool, starring Alexander Skarsgård, Mia Goth, Cleopatra Coleman, and this one is a weird, crazy, and disturbing journey into privilege and a very special technology that enables rich and privileged people to act in monstrous ways.
5 hours later.
In case you didn't know, Brandon Cronenberg is a sick puppy in cinema. Son of David Cronenberg, he has created his own space in the horror science fiction genre, separate from his father's. His father's more interested in the flesh, and Brandon Cronenberg is interested in the way the flesh messes with the mind. If you have a look at his previous film, Possessor, which I recommend you do, it's a fantastic piece of science fiction speculation. Cronenberg is all about the effects that technologies, and particular breakthrough transgressive technologies, have on human beings. In this one, you've got Alexander Skarsgård playing James, an unsuccessful writer who married a media heiress, M, played by Cleopatra Coleman, another Australian actress. They go on a holiday in a resort which is in a really strange country called Litokwa, which is not quite Asian, is not quite South American, is not quite European, but is a very unfortunate country. The country is very religious, with their own religious beliefs. The country is incredibly impoverished and seems to be mainly bankrolled by a string of gated resorts along a very picturesque part of its coast. It's a beautiful place. The resort is very well equipped. The people running it are nice and polite and helpful. There's a little Potemkin village nearby where they can go and have a meal away from the resort, but it's actually part of the resort and it's totally fake. And they have this little bubble they can be in an otherwise failing country. The movie was filmed in Croatia and Budapest in Canada, with the Croatian coast substituting for Litokwa. Now, Skarsgård's character James is a weak person. He's kind of got a little bit of a Bill Pullman vibe about him at the start, but Cronenberg films him in the initial phases in a way that gives us the strong impression that he is incredibly self-centered. There's a really great use of shallow focus, which isolates him from his environment in a couple of very important scenes at the start. Emma and James meet a couple, the Bowers, and the woman of the couple, Gabby, played by the wonderful Mia Goth, has her eyes on James. James thinks it's for purely sexual reasons. Turns out it's not. So the Bowers go on a picnic with James and his wife, and they leave the resort area. You're not supposed to do that, but somebody hires them a car, and they go off down the coast, and they have a little picnic by the water. And Gabby makes it quite clear to James that she has an interest in him. And I'm not going to spoil how, because it's very transgressive. And thanks a lot for Brandon Cronenberg for showing us that scene with the pebbles. So they pack up and finish their picnic, and they're driving back on the roads at night when the headlights start acting up on the car they've hired. And James hits and kills a man. And being the rich, privileged people they are, they flee the scene. Only the cops find out, and James is arrested along with his wife M. Litokwa has strict laws. If you kill someone, the family of the person you kill gets to torture and or kill you. But there's a way around that. The nation of Litokwa has found a way to monetize the abuses of rich people. If you pay a large sum of money, a clone of you can be made with your mind and memories, and the clone can substitute for you in that process of capital punishment. The only requirement is that you watch it and you see what is done to your clone because of what you did. James, being the gutless wonder he is, agrees, and he watches his clone being killed in his stead. And it's really interesting to watch Alexander Skarsgård's face during that scene. And you realise that James is not a good man in any way at all. There is nobody in this movie that comes out as a protagonist or as a viewpoint character we can associate with. They're all bastards. And the capping off of it is the fact that the Litokwa government gives you an urn full of the ashes of your clone to take home with you. Now, Emma's pretty shook up about this. She wants them to leave immediately, which is the same person's response. But James says he's lost his passport and he can't get away. James is lying, of course, we know that right from the start. He's led down a road of depravity where the Bowers take him further and further into a hidden subculture among the tourists of this resort, many of whom have undergone the same experience he has. They also find a local drug, which when you inhale the smoke of this particular root, induces hallucinations, and James is led down that rabbit hole further and further into sexual freedom, let's say, though whether it's freedom or not is resolved by the end of the movie, and he and Gabby play off against each other in a big way. This group then lures James into doing a lot more things. They go into a house to rob it and take something that one of the wealthier locals has, and during that process things just go from worse to worse, and James ends up going down a path of, is he himself or is he the clone? Is he sane or is he hallucinating? Is Gabby truly attracted to him or is she playing him? There are so many questions this movie raises for the protagonist, and he is too bloody thick to figure them out or even question them half at the time. And towards the end, this movie has the feels of a couple of other films. The first one is that there's a little bit of a feel about The Wicker Man about it, and the other one, which is probably the more salient one, is The Swimmer, the movie with Burt Lancaster. It's got a little bit of the feel of both of those without explicitly being those films or even copying them. Just the kind of atmosphere is very similar to those two films. Mia Goth is fantastic as Gabby. She's probably the ultimate femme fatale. Her Gabby is something extraordinary in the same way that Anne Savage is extraordinary in Detour. She gives us a woman who is out of control, and without it being sexist in any way or misogynistic in any way, she is insane and dangerous, and she's self-centered in a way James could not imagine. She's really good in this. Cleopatra Coleman gets the dirty end of the stick playing M, but she does give us some good character beats in there. We also get Thomas Kretschmann playing the local policeman, who gives us a really creepy vibe as well. Now, the movie uses a lot of lens flares and distortions of light to portray things like the cloning process and the hallucinations that James has. He's very big on, wherever possible, not using computer-generated effects, but using practical effects. And there are some very quick practical effects scenes which are only flashed on momentarily, which are as bad as, say, a Terrifier movie, but you only see them for half a second. Really extraordinary film with a really extraordinary piece of acting from Mia Goth in it, and Alexander Skarsgård as the poor fool does a good job as well. And I can see the movie being, for both of the actors, incredibly physically and mentally taxing. It's not a comfortable film as far as the characters are concerned, and to portray them the way that the actors do is all credit to them. I want to see what comes up next for Brandon Cronenberg. I think that he's got a distinct vision from his father, and this is a movie that really chucks away the idea of him being a nepo baby. He's not. He's somebody who obviously is influenced by his father's films, but has deliberately chosen a different path to show transgressive horror. Now, the themes in this movie are fairly obvious in some ways. Privilege and the corruption of privilege, and how with unlimited resources and a singular lack of control, people can do monstrous things to one another. Like a movie like Triangle of Sadness, this movie is about the 1% in a very negative way. It's about how extreme wealth can alienate you from the human norm, how it can make you less than human in many, many ways, and can veer you if you're a weak person or a person who just doesn't care, or a sociopath of some kind. leads you down a path of total degradation and total degeneracy and monstrousness on an incredibly ugly level. As to whether the movie is science fiction or horror, I think genres matter less in this kind of film than they do in something as blatant and obvious as Rebel Moon, for instance. This movie is both science fiction and horror. The science fiction trope is essential to the arc of the horror, in the same way that resurrecting a corpse is in Frankenstein. You should check this one out. I wouldn't do it if you're of a delicate sensibility, but this one has blood, guts. It does have scenes of people being very close to one another without clothes on, but it's not done in a prurient way. It's done in a way that it's done in a different way, and I like that. I grew up with prurient nudity in cinema, and there was never really a purpose to it apart from titillation. But in this, it serves a greater purpose by showing that these people, underneath the facade of being the beautiful rich, are bestial at a really, really primal level. So you should check out Infinity Pool if you get a chance. It's one of the best movies I've seen this year. Mind you, I've seen this many. And by the way, at the end of the month, I will talk about the 31 new movies I watched this month. I'm up to 5. I've got a couple more lined up for tomorrow. But Infinity Pool is the one that messed with me the most. And it messed with me in a way that makes me, I think, a better movie viewer than I was. But still, it messed with me. So that's it. I've got 3 movies there. 3 with clones, and that happened almost by accident. One's a steampunk fantasy science fiction movie. The next one's about misogyny. And the third one is about the abuse of privilege. All of them are worthwhile. All of them you should check out. So thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, hit the notification bell. You can also support the channel by donating at the YouTube channel page, or else you can donate by becoming a patron at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies. Next time I'll do a double feature of movies I've never seen before. That's the theme for the whole month. I'm finding it very challenging because I was going through the shelves and rearranging the shelves on some new shelving units I've got the other day. And I'm just loading books in alphabetical order on the shelves. I found about 50 movies that I really wanted to watch again right now. But I couldn't because I've got this agreement with myself to watch 31 unseen movies this month. So the struggle is real. It's a tough thing. And I wish I could claim myself so one of us could watch the movies I want to watch. But I'm staying true to it for the month. It's only for this month. After that, I can watch whatever the hell I like. But the struggle is harder than I thought it was. By the way, Luna update. Luna has to go in for more surgery. Her stitches split open again. She got an infection in one tiny bit about that big of her abdominal wound. So on Monday, she's going in for more surgery. We're picking her up Monday afternoon. But this should get her well on the healing process. We're finding a soft collar to put around her neck instead of the comb we've got. So the prognosis is good, but it's just another delay in getting the little moggy well and running outside and being her best self once more. It's been a bit tough this week with that setback for all of us, but she will be on the mend, and I will update you on how she's doing. And thanks again to the people who helped out with the medical fees for Luna. It was really appreciated, and I love you guys for that. So until next time, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies, watch some clone movies, watch some standalone movies, and I'll catch you next time.